Well, I'm making this video to talk about the notable post-release content of Dragon Age Origins, with some exceptions. I've decided not to include the Stone Prisoner in this video because that would mostly just end up being a review of Shale as a character, and that's not really what I'm going for with this. I'm going to do the same with Sebastian when I get to him. I'll just say that I think Shale is a fun character and leave it at that. The main focus of this review is going to be the Awakening expansion, of course, but I wanted to talk about the smaller additions as well, that might not warrant a standalone video. Alright, let's start with Wardens Keep. It was one of the DLC that was available at release of Dragon Age Origins. It's a nice self-contained piece of content that lore lovers will enjoy, as it explores the circumstances of the Grey Warden's banishment from Ferelden. The gameplay itself is quite short, and in those terms it's not a very substantive piece of content. But for the small adventure that it is, it holds up well, though it remains buggy. It also adds much-needed features to the base game, like a storage chest to keep extra items in. It also allows you to get the best sword in the game, Starfang. All in all, it's a very solid addition to the base game for the price point.
Looks like we're done here. A demonic invasion thwarted, a warden base safely rescued. We do good work.
Return to Ostgar is an even smaller piece of content, but for what it lacks in length, it makes up for with a lot of emotional resonance, especially if you play it late in the game. It brings us back to a snow-covered fortress of Ostgar long after the events of the prologue and allows you to pick through the wreckage, seeing what has become of the fallen friends lost that day. The edition features some poignant moments, especially if you bring the characters who were also at Ostgar with you, Alistair, Wynne, and Loghain. You might also bring your dog. The main downside of the experience is, again, it is very short. Now we have the standalone adventures. The odd child of the Origins DLC is the Darkspawn Chronicles, a sort of alternate timeline scenario where the protagonist died in the prologue and you play as a Darkspawn fighting against all the principal characters of the game in the final battle. You're a Hurlock champion and you recruit other Darkspawn to your party as necessary to kill the heroes. That's really all there is to it. I can't say it isn't fun, even if it is just replaying the final battle with the script flipped. It's just such a small addition at the end of the day that the only reason I replayed it was for the sword completing it unlocks in the base game. An addition I like much more was Lilianas Song, a module in which you play as Origin's companion Liliana, basically playing a part of her in-game backstory about how she was betrayed by her bard master Marjolaine and fled to the Chantry. I remember there being a weird controversy among some fans at the time because Liliana originally described these events as happening in Orlais, but the adventure has them happening in Ferelden, which some pointed to as proof that Liliana was an untrustworthy liar. But it's so transparently done so the developers could reuse assets from the base game, I have a hard time taking that seriously. Anyway, the module is a fun little romp that lets you partake in some mischief and explores a poignant moment in the history of a character I like. It's short and fun, though nothing groundbreaking or new. You do have to like Liliana in order to enjoy this DLC, though. You might also notice I used the soundtrack for this DLC at the end of every single one of my videos. This brings us to the feature presentation of this video, Dragon Age Origins Awakening. The Awakening expansion takes place after the ending of Dragon Age Origins and allows you to import your Warden into it, though it doesn't support the ultimate sacrifice ending, so there's just no explanation for why your character is suddenly alive again. You can play as a new Orlesian Warden commander if you don't import a save. Anyway, your Warden has been appointed Commander of the Grey Wardens of Ferelden, and if you wanted to play a Warden that wanted nothing further to do with the Order after the Blight, that's just too bad. This conceit bothered some people when the expansion launched because Origins does let you play a reluctant hero. Ultimately, I think you need to accept some constraints to the main character in order to make a story work, even in an RPG, but I understand that it bothered people who felt their choice wasn't respected. At any rate, Awakening offers an experience that is both an evolution of what Origins offered, and a foreshortened version of its predecessor. As an expansion, it is of course a much shorter experience in terms of content, as your ability to interact with companions is a bit more limited, and the areas you have to explore are just smaller. But those areas, in my opinion, are much more tightly designed than those of their predecessor. It avoids the slogs Origins was accused of by bundling plenty of quests and puzzles into smaller locations, with the result being a game that might actually reward you more for your time than Origins did at some points. It also builds off of Origins gameplay by giving you new specializations on top of your existing character, allowing all new ways to approach combat, most of which were quite fun and allowed your character to step outside of their niches. Want to be a tankier rogue? Become a legionnaire. Want your arcane warrior mage to be even more deadly in close combat? Give battle mage a try. That was my personal favorite. The options enhance the versatility of a system that already excelled in that respect. Narratively, I actually think Awakening did a better job keeping its focus on the threat than Origins did. Every locale you visit ties directly into the threat of the feuding Awoken Darkspawn factions and reveals more about them. The Mother was a suitably horrifying villain, and the concept of awakened Darkspawn wandering around with limited, if any, grasp on morality, but freed from the old god Song, is an interesting one. The disturbingly baby-faced children are some of the most unsettling creature designs I've ever seen. The Architect was also a fairly interesting villain, if that's the right word, as he has ostensibly noble goals, but his attempts to reach them have utterly horrifying consequences. I only wish we could have explored him a little more, and hopefully one day we will. Regrettably, he's one of those characters that gets more exposure in other media than in the game itself. Personally, I really enjoyed playing the part of a local lord, holding court and building up Vigil's Keep. It's very satisfying for the fortress to hold its own when you've done everything you can to strengthen it. As for the companions, there are a few fan favorites here, like Nathaniel Howe, Sigrun, and Anders, prior to his more controversial character shift in Dragon Age 2. They are interesting, and I enjoyed listening to Justice talk about being a spirit, and even my least favorite, Valana, had interesting things to say, but you had fewer opportunities and less time to get to know them than you did the companions of Origins. Oghren returns from the Origins cast, a controversial choice as player opinions are a bit split about whether his drunken vulgarities were funny or just gross and pathetic. Personally, I had no strong feelings about him. On the whole, Awakening did exactly what a good expansion should do: build upon the foundation of the base game, expand its systems, and offer an engaging new adventure. I'd recommend it to anyone at all who enjoyed Dragon Age Origins.
It will be up to you to deal with the vestiges of the Blight before the situation grows out of control. No easy task, but I'm confident you are up to it. Good luck, Commander. May the Maker watch over you.
Now, there are 2 more DLC adventures, both set after the events of Awakening. Golems of Gerak is another quick adventure add-on exploring a long-lost dwarven tie that tried to recreate the lost secrets of golem creation. It's a bit of a ghost story with some horror elements embedded in the plot and atmosphere that I enjoyed. Gameplay-wise, it doesn't introduce much new, but there are some interesting puzzle elements, and the monster it's all building up to is a pretty cool concept. The characters aren't memorable at all, really, but for the small adventure that it is, they're perfectly serviceable. And the last DLC I have to talk about is Witch Hunt, the follow-up to Morrigan's mysterious exit and oblique hinting in the base game. I'm not a big fan of this one, honestly. You go through areas you've been to before, searching for Morrigan, and she doesn't really give you much in the way of answers when you find her.
Many fear change and will fight it with every fiber of their being. But sometimes, change is what they need most. Sometimes, change is what sets them free. It is all I have to give.
I will give it this, it did make my Dalish Warden's origin story feel much more relevant than it did in the base game, and it does provide more closure for characters with strong feelings towards Morrigan, positive or negative. Your two companions for this adventure are colorful and endearing, though understandably there isn't much time to flesh them out. All in all, the story and character writing is fine, but the plot reveals are frustratingly vague, and the gameplay mostly feels like a retread that doesn't introduce anything new except for one boss. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Dragon Age Origins DLC. On the whole, I don't think any of it is bad. A few are just a bit short on actual new content. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next video.